Welcome to the Did Nothing Wrong podcast, where we try to cut through the noise and help you make sense of the chaotic information space around us. I'm Griff.
And I'm Jay McKenzie.
Our guest today is Michael Edison Hayden. He's a senior investigative reporter and spokesperson for the Southern Poverty Law Center. He's also the steward for the Southern Poverty Law Centers Union. Michael's previous work saw him based out of Mumbai, India, and he's appeared in a number of publications, including the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Al Jazeera America, Financial Times, Slate, the Times of London, and many others. More recently, you may have seen him on MSNBC discussing the fascist-friendly gala held by the New York Young Republican Club. Michael has reported on far-right extremists for a number of years now, and we've been following his work since the early days of the Trump presidency. You would be hard-pressed to find anyone who understands the tactics and goals of extremists of various stripes in the United States right now. Recently, Michael and his colleague at the SPLC, Megan Squire, released a series of articles which analyzed thousands of leaked text messages sent and received from the personal cell phone of InfoWars founder Alex Jones. There's a lot to unpack in these texts, and you should really go read the piece that Michael and Megan recently published if you haven't already. We will link it in the description of this episode, and we can't recommend it enough. For now, we're extremely lucky and grateful to have Michael on the show with us to break down some of the details. If you like what you're hearing, please make sure to subscribe to the newsletter at didnothingwrongpod.com. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating. We've got a great show for you today. Thanks for joining us. Michael, thanks so much for joining us, and welcome to Did Nothing Wrong.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you.
Absolutely.
And first off, we wanted to say we're really impressed that you and Megan managed to go through all of these text messages, but really you also showed your research skills by lining up the text messages he received and showing that content that people sent him actually ended up on his show, sometimes the same day. You pieced together a lot of fragments like that and turned it into a coherent narrative. Can you tell us what ended up surprising you the most when you were putting this story together?
I think that, if I had to pin it to one particular thing, it's not so much surprising because it's tough to be surprised by Jones at this point. I mean, this is a guy who has done such horrible things that my capacity for imagination with him is pretty broad. Like, I can imagine him doing almost anything. It's more the repetition of what we would categorize as like male supremacist themes, which is something that, as a guy, I kind of don't notice immediately with InfoWars when I'm watching it, right? Like, it's not the first thing that comes to mind. The first thing you think about is the disinfo.
Right.
You think about, the narratives that get spun to try to turn Trump's base in one direction or the other. And you think of there's a lot of anti-immigrant bigotry and stuff like that, but it's really the disinfo and lies told about things like Sandy Hook and Pizzagate, things like that. That's what you think of first. And it was only in reading the personal life and just seeing how he behaves and the people he associates with that you see these repetition themes around women. And I can't really look at anything from the radical right beat again the same way after it.
Is that a newer shift?
Yeah, it's not really a newer shift. It's so I really see, like, hate is a business, right? So, and we know that there's so much grifting going on. That's why it's like people say, "Oh, this person's not dangerous; they're just grifters." And it's actually, the reality is that it's both, right? Everybody who's got a grift going in the algorithm era is also got a scapegoat that they chase. And I really see more and more now. This is a change. People focusing on the LGBTQ community and focusing on women, right? And we see that also has avenues in real policy based on all the anti-LGBTQ policies around the country that are springing up. I mean, just recently, 3 states had recently restored the right to bear arms to felons, people who had been convicted of domestic violence. So those are things that are kind of institutionalized, and they seem like the safer thing, and it kind of helps with this coalition, this American fascist coalition, if that makes sense. These folks that are like, like the Proud Boys and stuff like that, who are not like explicitly white nationalists, but are comfortable with white nationalists, but also deal with a lot of, deal with a sort of a multiracial coalition of extremists.
Yeah, we did an episode really recently on Nick Fuentes, and he's got kind of a reputation sort of as being a grifter and maybe not necessarily being all that bad. But I found when we were digging through clips of this guy, he's just terrible. The stuff that dude says is just the worst. And realizing like who his audience is, it definitely makes one take the whole thing a whole lot more seriously when you realize that, they're pumping some of these themes into kids, as young as like 11 and 12, they say. So,
sure. Yeah. And some of them are going to get worse, right? Some of them are going to leave and give it up and find girlfriends and whatever. And they may become liberals. They may, life is complex, takes people in a lot of different directions, but they also, I think, can get worse from Nick Fuentes, and it can be a stepping stone to something much more dangerous.
Right.
No, I think it's interesting with male supremacy that you talk about. It seems like there used to be more the Mike Cernoviches, the people that was just all they did. That was their shtick, that was their thing. But it seems like today, all of these guys they've branched out. They're male supremacists, but they're also anti-vax, or they're also talking about the deep state and all these various things. I guess that was what I was curious about with Jones. I know he's probably always been okay with this, but yeah, it is.
It's the treatment. It's the way he treats women in real life that is on display in these texts.
Right.
That reinforces the rhetoric, I guess, for me, if that makes sense. It makes it much more. It makes it much more real to me, and it kind of is a wake up call to pay stronger attention to this material when it comes up. I think we all of them are misogynist, right? Like everybody in this world, right? I guess we're a clearer way of where I'm going. But experiencing the text made me want to pay stronger attention to that thread, and I feel like as a guy, I would neglect it sometimes.
Right, definitely, and that is really shocking and disturbing to see just how bad it gets with him personally in terms of how his personal views and opinions and, hiring ex-Blackwater mercs to stalk his wife. That's just really.
Yeah. I mean, and then who knows with that incident in the car that's described.
Right. So he does not sound like a particularly happy individual, obviously, from the texts, from everything you guys found. Do you think he would quit InfoWars at this point if he could, or do you think without it, his life would just collapse even further?
So that's a good question. I actually don't know. What would that, what would a world exist in which he could quit InfoWars? This is part of the problem. Once you're Alex Jones, like, what are you going to do? Go become a ditch digger or something? Like, It's really difficult to imagine him transitioning into a different career path, right? Like what? He's so far into who he is. I mean, the longer you are something, the harder it is to become something else. And it happens for people. Like, let's say like there's a filmmaker who wants to make music or even that. Like people know you for a particular thing. It becomes very difficult to be seen as anything else. So it's hard for me to imagine now. In a scenario where he was just a poster and he could just jump off and have another job and disappear, yeah, I think he definitely would at this point. I think he would. I think he probably would have liked to go back in time and not do what he did in Sandy Hook. I mean, it's not regret for what he did. I don't think he's remorseful, but I think he understands that there is a level of harm that he did to himself that he can never repair. I'm very grateful to the plaintiffs for bringing on that lawsuit.
Right. He's always going to be who he is as a result of that. He's never going to shake that.
Yeah, 100%. And also he may not have the access to the amount of money that he would have otherwise. I mean, like this guy is making a lot of money. And we're going to, in part 5 of this, you're going to see like how he's doing it.
Is he ever going to pay it off if he keeps doing this? It's what, $1.5 billion in damages that he owes right now. Do you think he'll ever repay that?
I don't think he will, and I'm not sure that it matters. I mean, it certainly. I don't think that the reason why, and I don't want to speak on their behalf. I don't think the reason why the plaintiffs took this on is in order to, just get money. Yeah, I don't think they're just like, they get what money they can.
Right.
Tactically, it's about principle, and it's about setting a precedent for future generations. And it's also, if you look at, for instance, the case, and as somebody I know personally very well is Tanya Gersh, who is the woman in Whitefish, Montana. And before I came to SPLC, a very famous kind of history-making lawsuit SPLC did, which really made me want to work there, which they sued Anglin and the Daily Stormer over this troll storm they kind of brought upon Tanya Gersh. We don't need to get into all the details of that, but I mean, her life was threatened, her children were threatened, and really just because she was a Jewish person in Montana and had some run-in with Richard Spencer's mother. And these lawsuits, like Sandy Hook and the Anglin lawsuit, are landmark lawsuits. These are important. These are the most important lawsuits going. They're history making, in my opinion. And the reason why is because this is all new territory. We didn't have, this is internet conspiracy, disinfo, hate stuff. This is a new generation of stuff. It's not, the Klan did XYZ in the physical realm. This is about what you can say and how you say it. And I think the most important thing for the plaintiffs is that there is some sort of accountability for people spreading lies, in the way that he did.
Yes. And to what you said about the lawsuit and it making you want to kind of work for the SPLC. When I was younger, I grew up in a town called Spokane, Washington, and we had a group over across the way in Hayden Lake, Idaho, called the Aryan Nations, run by a guy named Richard Butler. And they were terrible. I grew up in the punk rock scene, going to shows. These people would show up and start fights, start problems. And finally, they went a little too far. A couple of their security guards fired off some shots at some people who happened to be lost on their property. And the SPLC helped those people sue the Aryan Nations literally out of business. Those people ended up out. And ever since then, it's been like, the SPLC. These are the guys that finally took care of, the Aryan Nations when nothing else really could. So I hear what you're saying totally about, yes, the lawsuits matter.
Yeah, and the lawsuits matter, and also that the people who handle this Sandy Hook lawsuit to get these texts is important because these are our allies. And
right, totally. So the InfoWars audience, as you know, isn't real likely to read your article, but if they did, what do you think their response to this would be? Do you think they'd care that their beloved host is this completely sloppy mess of a person?
Well, whether they read it or not, I think they may read it, actually. I think there's a chance. I know one thing for sure, because we interviewed a few former employees of InfoWars for the story to just kind of support the text and provide color. And they told me, or at least Drucker told me, the guy who's mentioned a few times in that first one, he told me because he's in the office at the time some of our reporting came out, that everybody in the office was reading it. And that to me is like a whole nother tier above the fans, right? The idea that these folks who work there are reading it is very important because Jones is without, the number of allies that he supposedly has is diminished. According to these sources with whom I spoke, people are kind of starting to jump ship on him. And if we can further inform the people that work there, or they can see contacts, right? Like as a union steward, right? We know sometimes you'll be like dealing with a situation, an employment situation. You're like, what is this weird? Is this even weird? Like what I'm in, is this weird? Or is this just normal? And sometimes you need the context of speaking to people in other departments, you're speaking to people elsewhere or whatever to find out that, yeah, this is actually egregious behavior. This is something that is not typical for a workplace. Just like if you're in a marriage and something is, so some partner is abusive or whatever. So reaching those people who work at InfoWars and informing them of what is happening behind the scenes at their own place of work is, I think, the ultimate prize. Those are the most important clicks on the whole story. And I think it's going to get to them. And I think that because of the nature of Jones as a boss, it's a different relationship. You may come in as a fan, but once you become a boss, then it becomes different because bosses, they're not always great. And, you sometimes, like I had great bosses and I've had not so good. The folks that are not so good, and I'm sure Jones is not in a lot of ways. Look, just look at the text, right? He's not paying people on time. He's drunk early. Those folks need to know that how other people feel about that world. So that's the first thing, and put a pin on that. And then just quickly question about the fans that reach them. Probably not is the answer to that. But I will just say that what you're going to find out, just to preview something that's coming in part 5. I mean, he's doing markups as high as like 900%. To these fans, right? And if they are going to, they need to know.
Yeah. And this is just stuff in the InfoWars store you're talking about, but that's crazy.
We're going to find out about that part 5. I mean, this is a real. This is really, really, really sketchy stuff, in my opinion. And yeah, I mean, there are stuff apparently in the InfoWars store that is of reasonable quality, compared to other things that are similar. Like, I don't know, maybe the coffee might be good or whatever. So this is based on former employees where they would get it at a rate that is not marked up for like whatever. And you just go, I got a thing of coffee or whatever. And then the coffee is like good quality coffee or something. I'm not sure.
Right.
But he's selling the markups that they are using for these folks are so extreme. And the level of connection, the palpable connection between Jones pushing disinfo and then pushing these products is you're going to still get some gullible folks in there. But I mean, if anybody has reading comprehension at all, they're going to understand that, like, I should probably spend my money at Stop and Shop or
right.
Yeah. If you've got a promo code that's 10% off on something that's marked up 900%, I feel like you're still getting taken there, but yeah. They do love their promo codes.
But by a guy who's been drinking vodka since he woke up.
Well, and that's what I want to ask you. What I find interesting is that he's able to still hide some of this from his employees. I know you mentioned in the article that I think they have 3 different buildings. So is he able to kind of...
So the employees know about the alcohol because he's asking them for vodka, right? You see this bring vodka to the con room, right?
Right.
So they know he's drinking. I mean, it's like it is an open secret that he's intoxicated most of the time. And in fact, Drucker said, on the record in there, that he had his quote was that they would have a white Dixie cup in his hand all the time, and then 9 out of 10 times it had vodka in it. So he's not drinking water and coffee. He's drinking vodka most of the time. And yeah, the texts are just, I mean, there's more vodka texts coming. I mean, like in the business.
Oh my God.
It's just sort of like somebody comes to them and it's like, hey, we sold, XYZ of brain force, so much of like alpha brain, this, that, and the other thing. And his response is just like, bring vodka to the conference room. Like, it's like, it's wild. So they know about it already. This is a level of, I am not, I'm careful about what kind of language I use or whatever. I'm not going to diagnose him as an alcoholic. You can, discern whatever you want from these comments about drinking early in the morning and all this stuff and the amount of vodka. But I would say he functions scarily well, right? Like it's almost scary, like that somebody could be in that state and still be like running this business. It's kind of wild, in fact.
No kidding. No kidding. I mean, it puts a whole new spin on some of the rants that you hear him go on, to think that, wow, yeah, this guy might have been somewhat intoxicated when he said all of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, we know Jones got banned from a lot of social media and streaming platforms, but, obviously he's still around and producing content. Do you have any sense or estimate of the size of the InfoWars audience or its reach these days? Do people still take this guy pretty seriously?
We need to get part 5 out. That's what needs to happen, because there's a lot of what appears to be deception going on, and that may be we've written about how his friend Nick Fuentes has worked with Michael Zimmerman, and we wrote about how Michael Zimmerman try to inflate view counts essentially for Nick Fuentes' broadcast, make it seem like more people were watching than not. Keep in mind, all I would say as a teaser is that keep in mind that Michael Zimmerman has been a collaborator at InfoWars since 2015, right out of school, and was working at Fuentes' Cozy TV at the same time he was working at InfoWars. There's overlap. Right. So just keep in mind that. I don't mean to say that there is no audience for him, there's no audience at all, but I think the audience is less than it would appear, and I would imagine that his prospects are for, I think Jones's influence on the culture has crested a little bit, and it is starting to roll back. And if and stories like this are going to play a big role in that.
Right. You mentioned also in the article that he didn't contest the release of these texts. Considering how bad they make him look, that is very surprising to us, at least. Do you have a theory on why he didn't fight this?
I don't. I cannot tell you why. It boggles the mind. It seems like that there was a lot of incompetency going on, and then they gave up. If you've ever been in any kind of situation where the stakes are high in some way, like you could lose your job, and you're dealing with somebody on the other side who is not doing their diligence, right? They're not doing their thing. I think this is like one of those.
Right.
It's hard to imagine a situation in which anyone just seemed more overwhelmed and unprepared and unable to deal with the consequences they were facing. And so therefore, I really think that the plaintiffs were able to walk all over them. Do you remember, I don't know if anybody watches football, but I'm a Jets fan, obviously. And, when Mark Sanchez never really recovered from when he did the butt fumble, he basically ran into the back of the center, dropped the ball, and then the Patriots ran it back for time. It was one of the most embarrassing looking fumbles, arguably of all time. And, I still use the word butt fumble to describe things. This is like that, man. I mean, they just turned this phone over, it just in an unforced error, and then they made no effort to try to protect it.
It just mentally broke him, like you said, when he did that. It was just never really the same with that guy after the butt fumble. And
yeah, exactly. It could be a similar situation. I just don't understand. It's like telegraphing, hey, if you don't do this, it's like there's some sort of debt notice. If you don't pay this, whatever bill there's going to be some kind of whatever. And all you really have to do is a few annoying things, right? You're going to lose your driver's license if you don't go to the DMV by whatever day.
But there's some people that they don't care, or they still think it's never going to happen, or they just forget. I can't even imagine a 4D chess scenario here. There's just nothing, but maybe it's that simple. He's just
it could be that. I think that there's something interesting here at parallel, because baked into the worldview that Jones espouses are so many things that kind of deny warnings and reality, right? The only reason we are still talking about COVID and is these grievances about warning about possibilities of COVID, they're still upset about. They're still upset that COVID just exists, right? It's just this thing. Well, like I think any reasonable person should understand that, like, we had to take precaution. We had to do certain things. Like we didn't know, right? People could die.
Right.
And yeah, undoubtedly, like there's some overreach here or there in some places. Science was not entirely clear and all this, but people had to do something. People were dying at a massive rate or whatever. This denialism, like same with the climate, right? Where it's just not happening. I don't want this to happen. I don't want this to happen. I don't want the world to like disappear because of carbon emissions and stuff. It's just not. It's unwillingness to deal with reality, and it's so pervasive in the right wing.
Right, definitely. So, how do you think that the people like Alex's personal trainer justify working with him or for him? I mean, he's got this personal trainer, but the personal trainer is also the personal vodka delivery guy in the middle of the day. And these two things seem to be slightly at odds. And then you got the Blackwater guy, the ex-Blackwater guy, basically stalking Erica Wolf-Jones. Are these people sociopaths, desperate for work? Do they just like the money? What's motivating them to keep doing this?
This is really tough. This is really a tough question, isn't it? So I do. Like I'm just gonna put a pin in Michael Zimmerman for a second and say that he is an extremist. I think he's really radicalized that guy based upon everything we know about him. Registering the Christchurch domains, working with Nick Fuentes.
Right.
This is a guy we monitor for being an extremist, right? So that put a pin in him. I think with the majority of people who work there, that Alex Jones is a beloved celebrity in right-wing circles for many of the reasons why people, liberals, leftists, whomever, enjoy playing his clips. He's a tremendous showman. He says things that make people laugh. He's very, 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 very engaging. Like he's just, if you take the material out, he is a carnival barker. One of the greatest of all time, right?
Right.
I mean, he's like, there's a thing that kind of is discussed heavily in the text. Because he wants to show everybody how everyone's reacting to it and how viral it went. He said, if you're a leftist, I'm telling you, and whatever shit gets, whatever, I will eat your ass.
I'll eat your ass. I will eat your ass. I will eat your ass first.
I will eat your ass. You can look at it. Just Alex Jones. You remember it went viral in 2020. It's like, yeah, he's just, and there's music clips were made of it and all this stuff. And it was shared, not just by right-wing people. It was shared by people who disagree with Jones in every possible way, because it's just, it's wild, because he just lowers his voice. He goes, and I warned you when things get, I will eat your ass. I will eat your ass. I will eat your leftist ass. And it's funny to me too. It's funny to me too. So like these folks who get into on this, maybe they're libertarians. Many of them are, by the way. It's Texas, by the way. Okay, so that's one other thing. A lot of these people work in Texas and work in Austin. So there's a lot of libertarians. They like the Second Amendment. They don't want the government in their whatever. Alex Jones is like a hero in that world. Like he wasn't only associated with this hard right, neo-fascist Trumpism shit. He has a history and it's a little bit more complex, right?
Right.
So he's an icon. He's been in Richard Linklater movies.
Well, he had hits in all of those like Ancient Aliens, all those shows on like Discovery Channel. They cut to him as like a source, and you're watching that later. You're like, what? And then you realize, 2013, 2014, he wasn't this guy.
We are all trying to be, there's a strong desire to be seen in this world for all of us. And it's really hard to overcome because of just the nature of society and everything like that. I mean, it is a really shallow and stupid culture we live in right now. For many people, getting like somebody who's like a celebrity or something involved, like, hey, whatever actor just retweeted me and whatever. I mean, I think it's close to something that they can tell their friends about and whatever.
And maybe it'll rub off on them a little.
I'll tell you, my sister worked for a number of Hollywood actors doing their social media for a while. And it was horrible. I won't mention who they were, but they, when you get the job, it's like, oh yeah, I'm on the phone with this person. And it's like, wow, that sounds good for a week until you realize this person is just a piece of shit and just really treats them badly. So I think for many of them, it's like this proximity to celebrity is real. Like Jones is a big celebrity in that world. It's like,
right.
He's a star, and he's a star who has access to Trump, who has access to people in Trump's world. If you like Trump, a lot of people who are not extremists do, unfortunately. I mean, he's done, it's very hard to quantify who's an extremist and who isn't in the Trump world, because he kind of took over a lot of the Republican machinery.
Right.
So it's, you can't say, well, all these people are Nazis. That's not true. So I think a lot of folks, it's like that. And then you get to working for them, and it becomes your identity. I work for Alex Jones. That becomes a thing that's cool, that you want to tell people is cool. And then you're not stepping out of that world to see context about how you're behaving. In the case of Tim Enlow, right. Drucker said that he was a good guy who just got caught up in Alex's. I can see. I don't know. I don't. It's too illegal for me. I mean, it would be the thing. I can't say about. I can't say it's illegal because it just would feel illegal to me. And I don't know if there's going to be prosecutions for this or not, or if there'd be an indictment or something. But it is, I would think that somebody who has experience as a police officer should know better than to do something like that.
Right.
So, on Enlow's front, on some of these other people, Jesus, I don't know, man. I mean, as for his personal trainer, I mean, it's like you're Alex Jones's personal trainer. It's like, okay, well, like how much is he paying? We don't know how much he's paying him. Is he paying like is he getting? Let's say this guy makes $150,000 a year as a personal trainer, and the overwhelming majority of that money is coming from Alex Jones. I mean,
at some point, you kind of take one for the team and say, well, it's a job, it's a living. He's going to do what he's going to do.
It's wild, and it's very easy for someone to say, "Oh, why didn't you quit? Why didn't you whatever?" When I worked for Newsweek it was an 8-month period. It feels like it was 8 years, but it was only an 8-month period. And that's where I did a lot of my early radical right reporting.
Right.
And we see now what's happened in Newsweek, right? Like it's really fucked up. But at the time I knew things were bad. I knew things were corrupt. And I did not feel good about it. And it's very easy to say, well, why didn't you just quit? Why didn't you just quit? I mean, because I had a child who was not even in kindergarten. I had at the time, I had another child who was just born within a month that I was there. And this is around the time I'm realizing how corrupt it is. I got out, but I did not have the luxury of some of the younger people at Newsweek who quit. They were like 23, 24. They were able to quit. I did not. I had to go transition to another job. So I was at Storyful for 6 months, and then I eventually got to SPLC, which is where I really wanted to work.
Right. I hear that. Not being able to just walk out on something, the more adult you get, the more responsibilities you get. At some point, you have to plan your exit a little better than what you can do when you're a little younger and you don't quite have the level of responsibilities.
Yeah, these are adults. I mean, this is Pat Riley guy. I'm not trying to make excuses for him, but I mean, I don't know how he feels about or not about getting a text message about the he must feel and then he responds within 3 seconds, like, yes, I'll get your vodka. He must feel, if he is capable of seeing himself at a distance, he's going to feel a little ashamed.
I think at a certain point you can probably imagine that they're saying, well, it's bad, but it'd be worse if I wasn't here, or I'm restraining him in some way. There has to be like some sort of attachment that they build up and think, well, I shouldn't probably be doing this, but maybe I can save him from himself a little. It's hard to know what is going on in their own minds, but I could see that being part of the rationale at least.
Right. So We have to ask you about the woman that Jones calls Pat Johnson in his phone.
Yeah.
Which is an alias Jones uses for a woman he either is or was having an affair with. You mentioned in the article that Pat Johnson repeatedly shares links to right-wing articles to Jones, and Jones in turn appears to have used at least some of this material on his subsequent shows. Can you make any sense of this for us? Why is his apparent mistress also his source for material? Is this something they bonded over, or?
So this, I can see how this might seem conspiratorial, even like where it's somebody like trying to plant things like into. So even right, like I could see that, but I know who Pat Johnson is, and the reason we made a choice not to. Early on, not to ID this person. And the reason why is because marriages and families are complex and
right. Okay.
This person is married and has children. And people have affairs for a lot of reasons. And people regret things that they do. And I did not want to be the person. I mean, a number of things could have happened. This person could have already come clean about their affair with Jones and be trying to reconcile with their husband, right? And they could be sorry. And also, I think sometimes when people have affairs, they can also, affairs or any relationships that are new or whatever. You can, the sharing of links. I mean, it could be just to impress somebody by showing them their interests, right? Like, so let's say I'm with somebody who is an architect, and I'm like, here's a bunch of links about architecture. And it's like, I don't know if this person, it's difficult to tell from the thing, if this person is like really, really, really in the shit, right? Was not exactly sending it was links, and it was sort of like, do I know for a fact that she believes this stuff or is interested in Plandemic or whatever, or is she just trying to get Jones's attention by showing him things that she thinks he'll like?
I would like to know, was it unique to Pat Johnson, or were there a lot of texts? Because I know you didn't mention every single text you went through, and there's some stuff you didn't include. I'm guessing because it just didn't really match up with the story. Were there a lot of people sending him material, or was this more unique to Pat Johnson?
Joe Rogan sends him some stuff.
Really? Of course.
Yeah, and that story is going to be out next week.
Okay.
But that's a really interesting one. That's an interesting one, the Joe Rogan one. I think it's hard to see how these were going to be received and are not received by folks. It doesn't necessarily spin off a ton of additional reporting, in part because the stories are really self-contained. There's not much you can really break off as a scoop. But boy, that one's an interesting one. Basically, we had for a top line there that Jones tried to get. He basically tried to get Andrew Tate onto the Joe Rogan Experience, and we focus on his text with Rogan and Tate.
Oh boy.
Yeah. But that's a side thing. The Pat Johnson thing. I mean, he's listening to Pat Johnson because they're having an affair. They appear to be. And it's not like people are trying to get their stuff onto InfoWars all the time. It's actually she was, and she didn't seem to be wanting to. She's just kind of like, hey, you may have missed this, whatever. And she usually sends him a lot of links while she's kind of waiting for him to come over.
Okay, got it. That makes a lot more sense.
Interesting.
Yeah, so she's just kind of like, hey, this is what it's like, what do you have in common with, if you're having an affair with Alex Jones, what can you talk about?
What else can you talk about? Yeah. What are his other interests other than vodka?
I have friends that I message about music with because we're interested in that. I have friends that I message about sports with. I have friends that we have philosophical discussions about politics and about who could win and what, scenario is, and kind of, gaming out, what it would take for Ron DeSantis to win, these type of things. I have friends that if you saw my texts, you'd see that stuff. And when you see Jones's text on the whole, you don't see that. You don't see like that he needs to get home to watch the Cowboys. Like, you don't see him.
The random one-offs are like Milo asking him to do a book blurb. It's not
right.
His whole world is really InfoWars, and that is his whole world is InfoWars, and what I would describe as like pain, pain, wow. And sometimes sex. And booze.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that you read it, and if it was anybody else, you'd find yourself feeling extremely sorry for that person. That was what I got out of it, was like, wow, this sounds like an absolutely miserable existence, but it's Alex Jones.
Yeah. My favorite reactions to it so far, and I don't mean this like ironically or sarcastically or anything, are the people who like, well, I almost felt I felt bad for him until I remembered it was Alex Jones or whatever. Those are my favorite reactions, because that's what but seriously, I want people to feel something. I think that's a much more effective way at defanging him.
Right. Just to realize how miserable a person this is that we're really dealing with here.
I mean, miserable, but also that just, to anybody who's really thinking about going this route, to go and make money off of this stuff, you got to think twice. And I really think that this is also true of even the folks who just do this like heterodox, like, oh, I'm truth telling about whatever, trans people and all that. Anybody who hooks into this kind of even a little bit with this reactionary world, it's like, it's not about anything other than, yeah, it's easy, it's rewarding, there's money, but as soon as you get on that road, there is pain and self-destruction starting, and life becomes very dark. I don't think that if we've had Gavin McInnes's text messages, and we have his text messages certainly with Alex, but I can't imagine that this is, that he's having the best life at this point. This is a trade-off, and a really bad trade-off in life. And these, boring, corny to have spiritual values and money is not important and all that stuff. But those things really do matter in terms of your own sense of self-worth. And when you trade it off, these are real sellouts here. They lose everything.
Right. Okay, so we've talked about how horrible these people are, and we're still barely scratching the surface of all the awful things that they've done. And I'm curious to hear from you what you think it's going to take to decrease the relevance of these people, because at least some of them still have pretty devoted followings. Do you have any ideas for a realistic plan to clean up the information space so these guys don't get to drive so many conversations?
So I'm gonna say something optimistic here, which is I do think it's getting better. I think it's getting better even with Elon Musk like letting all these people back onto Twitter, for instance. I think it's getting better all the time, and that may be a surprising thing to hear, but I think they're back on Twitter now, for instance, a lot of them, and you keep saying they're like, we need to get the 2016 energy back, and I feel like the 2016 energy is back and stuff like that. You don't need to talk about the 2016 energy being back if it's back. You're in a moment where it's real. You're really impacting the culture, and I'm not saying that they're that they don't have influence anymore. I'm just saying that we've actually made real progress, and somebody like it's almost like, in The Grinch Who Stole Christmas, where like the Grinch is like, oh, I'm going to rob all these people in Whoville of their Christmas, and then they're going to cry and and then they don't. Right. This is like Elon Musk bringing all the extremists back onto Twitter and not really getting the effect, is where I feel. It's like, it's just, you know what I mean? It's just like people are like, yeah, okay, it's fucking carpe dunctum again. Like,
the shock value is worn off for a lot of it.
Right.
It's like, yeah, he's getting engagement for sure. But like, I don't know, but he's not resonating in the same way. It doesn't feel like, oh my God, like Trump is gone, and the energy, the vibe is they're not on the attack in the way they were. They're trying to be. They're trying to look like they're on the attack, but it's not where it was.
Kind of speaking of what you're saying here, the Twitter files, and they keep posting those, and it gets less and less interest. And it is very much paid attention to by the right and talked up. And why isn't the mainstream media talking about this? In 2016, the mainstream media would have covered the Twitter files like it was a real scandal. And in 2023, they are just ignoring it. And that is a real difference.
Yep.
They're ignoring it, and it's also because there was a point to be made in 2016, I think, about Hillary, and people were talking about the influence of the cultural hegemony and neoliberalism and all this stuff. And there was a point to be made there. It was being made by a split between people who have legitimate concerns and bad actors. Right. And so that's made it complicated. And now, in the post-2020, post-J6 landscape, the kind of the liberal villains at Twitter look like victims, quite frankly. And I think that perception is very clear to people. It's just even if you're not crazy about that, and I'm going to crazy for different reasons, it's just sort of like this guy came in and bought this and dumped them on their ass, and it's just we're supposed to be mad at these people. It's just very hard to do. And Taibbi seems like a crank. He's on late night with Fox News, looking completely unhinged.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. It's sort of like they cannot find what they can't get their hands on what they're looking for. They can't put their hands around this energy that they felt that they had, and they barely had it. Trump won by a very slim margin in 2016. Right. He lost the popular vote, and it speaks to changes that have happened in the culture since that we don't feel that reverberation anymore. Now, how do we make people listen to them less? I would argue that I'm doing that. I'm trying to do that. It's not just me, but I can only control myself. And by publishing things about these folks that they don't want people to know, we can, or they don't want people out there, or sometimes even with framing that they don't want to see, like where our New York Young Republicans Club story. Oh, yeah. They wanted to be seen at that thing, but they didn't want to be seen at that thing the way we were. Show them, and they didn't. Jack Posobiec didn't want. The master spy, intelligence man did not want. Us to be on top of his arrival into New York City all the way to to him speaking, and to be speaking to me directly. He would have done anything he could to avoid that.
Mm-hmm. And he has up until this point, hasn't he?
And so that's the thing, is to just keep doing it. I think we're doing it. It's the problem is there's no you fire two space torpedoes into the defect in the Death Star and fly away. There is nothing like that. It is a slow process of peeling back what happened there. And every morning you're going to wake up with new bullshit from Glenn Greenwald on Twitter. And that, you cannot look at that and think that there's not progress, because they're going to keep, presenting their bullshit. Tucker Carlson's going to keep going every night. But do I think that Tucker Carlson is still as strong as he was 2 years ago? I'm not sure anymore. I got to be honest with you. I don't know what the ratings are exactly. They may be as strong ratings-wise, but do I think? I think that by, again, talking about saying the things that they don't want to hear in the framing, these figures don't go out in a very clear way. I'd say Tucker's actually probably the best case of somebody who's still strong. But it takes time. Like this process with Alex Jones, these Sandy Hook lies go back over a decade. Right.
Well, they want you to get discouraged. They want you to think it's hopeless and nothing is working and nothing matters. And it is really easy to fall into that trap. But I guess what you're saying is just keep going, keep doing it, keep fighting. And
My favorite is this is a real deep cut. This is really only for you guys. I probably would I think I'm listening to this, but like that dude Joe Jordan, Eric Stryker, who is of course recently made it to a terror watch list, which is not a great way to end up in your 30s. You know, he's blaming me for that. Right. Oh. So he's like on television, and it's like not long ago, I was only telling me he was posting that I was ineffectual and couldn't do anything, and I wasn't the real problem. That's why it's like it's all ADL now. They got nothing. He's got, they got no power. And then within like a span of a few days, be like, I'm on the terror watch list because of Michael Edison Hayden. And it's like, well, do I have the capacity to? Am I like a cuck who can't do anything and I can't get anything going, and I'm just trying to post and I'm just totally worth ignoring? Or did I push you on the terror watch list?
Absolutely.
Seems like there's a pretty yawning gap between those two perceptions.
No kidding. Which is it, Joey? Which is it?
Wow.
Little
guy.
He's a dumb fuck, man.
Yes, agreed.
Yes.
Absolutely.
That's like one of the. I'm missing him in a way. Like I feel like I've been. They've become unimportant. Some of them, and that's the reporting. I was just saying, like I've seen it. And this is like something to give confidence to everybody who's listening. Is I have seen like these very tactics of staying on messaging and reporting and continuing to unearth true things about people and stick to that. I have seen that work over time, and you can't get a better example than George is part of the Right Stuff Network, now National Justice Party.
Right.
Just look at, do yourself a favor. No, actually don't. Just the people on the who are hosting it. Go to Panovich's podcast website and go through the sidebar and just take a look at the regularity of the podcasts and the energy of that site and compare it to like 2017. And it's just, you just can't miss it. I mean, they did a show called, it was like, they have a show called Something and Jesse. Jesse is like one of the co-hosts. And the show they did recently, I just went to go check the website because Jason Wilson and I were laughing about them. And I was like, we got to see how long they posted. And it just is a screenshot of whoever's name they cut out. And it just says, and Jesse. And because only Jesse could do it, I guess. And it's like the only podcast they had done, like really thing that they produced in like the last few days. And then there was another, and Jesse. And then there was, what was the other thing that was amusing? There have been like 3 Third Rail podcasts. That's the guy Spectre.
Yeah.
Spectre.
3 Spectre, like Third Rail podcasts since like October.
Oh. Ooh.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's different when it's, if somebody has a pet project, they want to try something and they do a podcast and then they're like, I'm not really enjoying this. I don't want to do it anymore. Or what? That's different. We're not talking about you're bored and you're trying. We're talking about, radical right figures who want to impose their will on people and, harm people they perceive to be political enemies. And for them to just bail and give up, that has a lot to do with the reporting, people bailing on them after the reporting and just sticking to the truth.
Well, you have to take some credit there because their possible benefactor, Charlie Bosman, fleeing to Russia and not coming back certainly can't be helping their state of operations over there.
That's it. Well, we'll do that. Let's do a separate podcast.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you, Michael. I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, this
has been
fun.
a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man.
Absolutely. And we'd love to do a longer one at some point or whatever, just talk about some of this other stuff. We'd love to have you on again.
Ideally we'd have you on every week. So you're pretty much always welcome. Just let us know, man.
Totally.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for listening to the Did Nothing Wrong podcast. If you want to hear more, you can go to didnothingwrongpod.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at James, the word 4, and the letter M, all one word, and Grizza BJJ, Grza BJJ, as well as DNW Pod. Thanks again for tuning in, and remember, everyone mentioned did nothing wrong.